Good morning, everyone. I'm starting just a couple of minutes late because I was running behind. Um, this week, we're talking about the theme of liberation. And on Monday, I shared uh, kind of a story of my own breaking free from nationalism and capitalism in all kinds of ways after reading the Gospel of Luke. So it was one of the mystical experiences that I had, broadly defined. And when I say mysticism or mystical, um, that can mean different things to different people. For me, it is when you encounter presence in a way that reframes everything. So I think mysticism can happen when you're in nature and you might not believe in God at all, but you feel a sense of connection and presence. Um, all the stories I'm going to be sharing throughout this are mystical in that sense, in a way that I believe is oriented towards the divine. And so I shared a story that fits that mold on Monday. Wednesday, we talked about the theme of liberation. And Fridays, we talk about different figures who somehow point towards that theme. And so today I want to tell the story of Rosa Egipcíaca. And I don't I don't speak Portuguese. I don't know how to pronounce Brazilian Portuguese words. So if I'm butchering pronunciations, know that I'm not very linguistically minded white North American. So, uh, Rosa Egipcíaca is one of these people that we don't. I mean, I never heard about her until I started doing research on um, Black women from the Americas who were in some way mystics. I started looking into this. And so Rosa's story begins in what is now modern day Nigeria at the age of 6. And a lot of the information we have about her mostly comes by way of what's recorded from the Inquisition. So everything we know about her is probably skewed against her because of the vested interests of the Inquisition. So keep that in mind as I tell her story. At the age of 6, she was stolen into slavery. And at the age of 14, she was sold to a mining camp, and where they were gold mining in colonial Brazil, where she was forced into prostitution. Later on, in her 20s, she believed that she was possessed by demons, and so they brought a priest in to exorcise the demons. And somehow from that, she kind of came into her sense of vocation, you could put it that way. And then also, depending on the accounts, the priest who cast out the demons in her either became spiritual comrades, kind of in the sense that Francis and Claire of Assisi were kind of in it together, or lovers. The Inquisition later accused them of becoming lovers. Anyways, she started to preach and prophesy, and this led to her being venerated by a saint, even by the white colonizers who owned her, and they set her free. Right? So this is interesting so far. Okay, so you have this slave girl who became a prostitute who, after having demons cast out of her by a priest, starts preaching in such a way that even her masters, quote unquote, venerated her. There's lots more to this story, but what ends up happening is she ends up starting something like an intentional community, something akin to a religious order, made up of former prostitutes, slaves, people who were forced into prostitution. And During this time, she learns to read and write, being the first that we know of person of African descent in Brazil to learn how to read and write. And she wrote a book called The Sacred Theology of Love of God, Brilliant Light of Pilgrims' Souls. I'm going to say that again. The Sacred Theology of Love of God, Brilliant Light of Pilgrims' Souls. 290 pages, mystical text. Only 6 pages survive that can be found today, which sucks. And I looked to try to find out what those 6 pages say, so I can figure out what of the lore that we know about her, which is scant, was from her own hand or how much is from the Inquisition. She started a sort of cult. Her writings and proclamations made her kind of the figurehead of this cult that worshipped the hearts of Joseph and Christ's grandparents. She had a core following that was blended together elements of Christian iconography, Catholic iconography, and traditional African practices. So the Inquisition started getting upset with her. They tried her and Father Lopez, her lover or comrade, by the Inquisition. He kind of denounces her, says that she was bewitched by her, basically, and then she was supposed to be executed, maybe, but she, by all records, it seems like she was kept on by the Inquisition to basically be their cleaning lady back in slavery. Now, here's some badass things about her, like the things that she would preach, according to I'm assuming this comes from the Inquisition. She would claim that the baby Christ would come to her and suckle at her breast, and that as a form of thank you, Christ would then comb her hair. She said that Christ exchanged hearts with her, so that within her beating heart was the living sacrament. She believed that she was a bride to the Holy Trinity, and that she was named by Christ to be the new Redeemer of the world. Now, when we hear stories like that, it's easy to be like, heretic. She sounds crazy. But if we take a step back, don't allow Christian narratives of orthodoxy to short circuit our brain. We look at the entire social context, her origins, her experiences, and then later on, the way in which she engaged and encountered these people who were colonizers and enslavers and how they responded to her. It's hard for me not to think maybe she was fucking right in some way. Can you imagine if her hybrid spiritual teachings, she was clearly brilliant, charismatic, and gifted, tenacious. If all those people would have taken her seriously, that she was the new Redeemer of the world, what would colonization have looked like? I'm not saying she died for the sins of the world. We don't know exactly in what sense she meant. Maybe she, as kind of this embodiment of womanist praxis, was offering a way forward to the world, apart from this path that it was currently on of colonization and conquest and capitalism and exploitation and dehumanization. But we will never know, because her words have been mostly destroyed. And all we know about her is what we're told by the people who oppressed her. So, because of that possibility of this way of liberation, this woman who was taken into slavery to an entirely different land, sold to a mining company to be a prostitute. That does not sound like optimal sex work, and it isn't. It's enslavement. So, very little determination, but somehow through it all, able to spark devotion. and bring liberation to her fellow enslaved sex workers, to create this possibility for something new. That's fucking badass. And that's why I shared the story of Rosa Egipcíaca for the theme of Liberation this week. Okay, I'm going to switch here. And I think Kaylee was on for a second, and now Kaylee is not. So I'm just going to keep talking. If you have any comments, please share them or ask about this story, about the theme, about anything that's been brought up so far on this broadcast. I want to just take a moment to share that we're in fundraising season between now and Christmas. We're trying to raise $20,000 by the end of the year and also get some new recurring donors, people to give monthly. And so go to our website and check that out. We're about a quarter of the way to our $20,000 goal, which is great. And we'd love to get past that goal if possible. So what does the money do? Like, this is kind of a question that we haven't really talked much about in this broadcast. What is the work of CPI? Well, there's a few things that we currently do, and there's some things that we're going to do more in the future. And I don't want to get too much into it now because I want to get to the conversation topic. But we have a 2-year spiritual direction training program that emphasizes justice and social systems analysis, which makes it kind of unique. Spiritual direction and social transformation. We actually have opening up applications now, but we're really officially pushing this on Monday for our second cohort. It's a 2-year program. There's classes on conventional sorts of approaches to spiritual direction, but then also group process, the nature of social systems, political discernment, things like that. And we also, I do spiritual direction. Sometimes we engage in activistic stuffs, liturgical direct action trainings, retreats, consulting. And then in the coming year, we really have 2 big things that we're going to really push. One are these discernment circles where groups of people can gather together to support each other in discerning how to show up more in their work. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about that when we get to discernment as a theme later on in the series. And then also, Kaylee and I have been scheming and talking with others about a call to action for faith-based organizations, churches, and individuals to take practical stances towards inclusion and celebration of queer folks, particularly trans folks, in light of this growing backlash that we're experiencing in our country. So, Kaylee is now in. You're in a car.
I am in a car. I was planning on streaming from the airport, but there's so many people at the airport, like apparently it wasn't a good enough signal, so I had to drive away from the airport, and I found a hotel parking lot that I'm just sitting in, so I could join in.
Okay. So I
So
don't know how
I
much of
was
the Rosa story you actually heard or not.
I didn't get any of it. I
Damn
I
it.
was trying to be here. But yeah, I literally had to drive a couple miles from the airport to be on um a different cell, like network, not network, but like tower, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Well, this is those watching, and we're going to really lean on you to ask questions about the Rosa Egipciaca story. But the short version of it is taken into slavery from Nigeria at the age of 6, sold to a mining company at the age of 14 to be a prostitute, ends up somehow, after having demons cast out of her, sparking religious devotion, people who saw her as a living saint, including her masters. And so she started kind of this cult that was a hybrid of like venerating Joseph and then Christ's
Hmm.
grandparents, and then also mixed with African like spiritual practices. And so she got brought up by the Inquisition. She also wrote the
What time? What
like.
time? What time frame is that?
Oh, let's see. I should have given that as context early on. So she was born in 1719.
Okay.
So she was, as far as
Yeah.
people know, the first person of African descent to learn how to read and write in Brazil.
Interesting.
And she
Wow.
wrote a 300-page mystical text called The Sacred Theology of Love of God, Brilliant Light of Pilgrim Souls. There's only 6 pages that exist, but it was banned as heretical.
As any
Fucking
good,
badass.
yeah, as any good spiritual book should be. If it's not being branded as heretical, it's probably not worth reading.
And the other thing, she believed that the baby Christ would come to her and suckle at her breast and then comb her hair as thanks, and that Jesus exchanged hearts with her, that she was the bride of the Trinity, and that she was the new Redeemer of the world. Which I'm like, why not?
I mean,
What would have
that's
happened
a.
if people had taken her seriously? I don't think the world would have gotten any worse. It would have only gotten better.
I mean that. Yeah, that that part is fair. It's like there's that level of like, yeah, that's really weird. That's not like technically like theologically correct, but at the same time, it's like, what is the worst that would have happened if we would have let a marginalized voice like speak and like teach the oppressor like something? Because yeah, the thing about oppression is those who are the oppressors don't tend to listen to the voice of the oppressed.
She, I think she died in Portugal, under the basically in forced cleaning lady of the Inquisition, but she died at the age of 52, which is sad. She was beaten a lot. There's one time like where people were mad at her religious cult, and so they beat her, and so she always had a limp after that. So she had a really fucking hard life.
Mm-hmm.
Flogged, partial paralysis. Yeah, that sucks.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you said the Inquisition, and that like there is actually a reason why the Inquisition is known for like their brutality is because they actually did it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the stories of what people have done in the name of Christian love is not 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 very good.
No. Yeah, it kind of raises the question like I taught a little bit about her life in the context of, a couple of other um, Black women mystics in the Americas,
Mm-hmm.
kind of roughly in the colonial period, um, pre-Civil War, basically. And it's interesting, like what makes it to the canon of Christian mystics. So if you look at, this is like one of the classic, like littler texts, the Essential Writings of Christian Mysticism by Bernard
Mm-hmm.
McGinn. There's like, McGinn has like these just fucking tomes to different mystics, but it's usually like white European mystics, and then
Mm-hmm.
especially ones that are kind of somehow orthodox. Like there's this
Yeah.
aversion to any heterodox mystics, but then also like we don't count in these classics of Christian mysticism, we don't count a lot of the Shakers. The Quakers tend to get a little bit more respect in some of these
Mm-hmm.
collections, but the Shakers don't. Um, yeah, any of the mystics that are kind of, it just seems a little bit too uncomfortable because their mysticism is deeply tied up with some sort of justice issue.
Yeah. And I mean that is kind of like the history of Western religion is like you do tend to have these thinkers that um have a lot to say about spirituality, but because they don't align with the powers that be, it um their like their voice is suppressed because like
Yeah.
it challenges power, and um yeah, it's just. But whenever like there's like a lot of mysticism within Christianity that just it's that isn't like European
Hmm.
or Eurocentric.
Yeah.
Like most people uh, m- most people aren't taught that like there were three strands of Christianity. Like we know about the Roman strand, that's like where Protestantism comes from, where
Hmm.
Catholicism comes from. There's the Greek Orthodox, which is its own strand that encompasses the Russian Orthodox. But there's also like the Syriac Church that
Hmm.
grew out of Christianity, that actually existed outside of the Roman Empire, and it never married uh it never married power like the other two strands did. And there's a lot more mysticism in those in Syriac Christianity. It's like it's the Christianity that moved into India, and
Hmm.
so whenever Europeans made it to India the first time, they showed up and they were already Christians, but then they're like, "Oh, you're not the right kind of Christians," and so they tried to suppress it. But there was a form of Christianity that like was okay with Buddhism, and like they found they it was kind of a Christian Buddhist like hybrid that like worked, and Europeans didn't like that.
It's and it's interesting that if we're going to talk about um, unsavory types of Christianity, it's fascinating to me that to this day people still love the hell out of Bernard of Clairvaux, right?
Hmm.
Kind of considered one of the arc mystic saints, Saint Bernard. It's even a dog named after him. Uh,
Hmm.
and this stuff is great. He's
Is the
the
dog name? Is the dog actually named after him?
I'm going to assume, I don't know. It just seems better
Okay.
if I pretend that it is, even if it's
Yeah,
not. I don't
we'll just say
care.
it is.
Let's
Yeah.
assume it's
Yeah,
true.
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Um, he, and the things he's known for, like, yeah, on the surface, it's quite lovely, like going through the Song of Songs and in making them about religious devotion.
Hmm.
So, like,
Which is weird,
okay,
by the way.
that's weird. There's some bringing some eroticism into mysticism, like some of that's really sweet.
Yeah.
Also, he's his sermons that inspired the First Crusade.
Yeah.
He was kind of, in some ways, an architect of the Crusades. And people will, if you say that, people will be like, well, man of his times.
Yeah. You know,
But at
yeah,
the
I
same
love the
time,
man of
like
his times type.
Rosa Egipcíaca was a woman of her times,
Hmm.
and she did not spark crusades. The worst thing she did was maybe say, like, get a little heretical about how she was somehow an embodiment of the redemptive power of God in the world. Very proto liberation theology in
Yeah.
an amazing way. Somehow that is more unsavory to people than a dude sparking the crusades.
Hmm.
That's kind of where it's like, Arnett says, is the major lesson here that Europeans are assholes? Well, whiteness
That's
is assholey.
yeah.
Colonization is,
I mean,
you know,
you could boil it down to something like that, but it is it's a lot more complicated. Like a lot of times we blame Constantine for the solidification of Christianity and the empire, but like honestly, the full grasp of Christianity's marriage with the empire was with Charlemagne and the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire. Like, um, but like it just I don't know. It's just the way that like Christianity and power intermarried within Europe that um really it is really the biggest issue, because that I mean this is where we get the doctrine of discovery, right?
mhm.
Am I saying that right? Um,
Yeah.
because religion and power were like one hand in hand, and it's like um You know what? Just it, screw it. Yes, that is what that's the moral of this story. Europeans are assholes.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all the whole through line is the fear of Islam. So the reason
Yeah,
Charlemagne came to power is
especially with the
because
Crusades
he's
and yeah.
the grandson of Charles Martel, who you
Hmm.
can remember it's the Battle of Lyon or Tours, who stopped the Muslims from entering it. And so then it basically
Hmm.
his he was the mayor of the palace. He stopped the incursion, and so then forged a new dynasty that was solidified under his grandson, Charlemagne, all in the under the specter of fear of Islam. The
Hmm.
Reformation cannot be understood apart from the anxiety around Islam. Uh,
Yep.
that's why the radical Reformation was seen as so shitty, is because they weren't like towing the political line, so they were just as good as traitors.
Yeah.
Um, and then Bernard of Clairvaux within that context of this deep loving mystic calling the Crusades. Even the
Hmm.
doctrine of discovery, the whole the premise is like any land that isn't under the sovereignty of Christ it's yours for the taking, and the people need to be brought under subjugation. All of that doctrine of discovery mojo was framed initially under coming into Muslim lands,
Hmm.
and so that weird Christian supremacy,
Yeah.
especially in dominance over Islam, it's shaped so much of what we take for granted, and
Yeah. And
that's
the
yeah.
yeah, and there was a shift also like whenever I mean this is later, this is after, or this is more in the Enlightenment where um that Christian supremacy uh the in academic circles shifted Christianity from being um a Semitic a Semitic religion to a Greek based religion in the way that it was understood. And that was primarily to separate Christianity from Judaism and Islam.
Mhm.
And uh, because I don't know, we decided that Greek culture was superior, and if Christianity is connected to Greek culture, then it makes it superior in some way. So it's like the we just have a history of like framing it to like try to make Christianity like the top that there is, but it's really there to give justification for treating people as other if they don't align.
Mhm. Arnett writes, okay, I'll grant that it's not that simple. It does seem, though, that the will to domination has taken over a section of what should be a universally healing, inclusive, and redemptive faith, and that white folks are right in there riding the crest of this. I mean, that's I can't
Yeah,
disagree with that at all. The issue
yeah.
is, like, well, what do we do about it? I mean, it's part of
Hmm.
it, and that's a whole other conversation topic. But this
Yeah.
are expressions of Christianity, even like the really nice seeming ones, like the Mennonites and Quakers, have embedded within them the DNA of some sort of supremacist logic.
Hmm.
And so even the most progressive people like will act all supremacist as shit. If you're not a part of it, you can notice it, and if you're in it, they don't. All
Yeah.
the self-referential insider way of talking, the way of assuming that everything else is lesser than, um, the need to control the narrative, all of that is just it's all awash, and it is a set of habits that have been passed down through Western civilization, particularly in European context. It's tied up with
Yeah.
whiteness and this whole thing that shapes what it even means to be white.
Hmm.
And it has to go. People usually don't go far enough down when they're cutting out the roots.
Hmm.
But we could talk more. It's been a half hour, and I have to go to the bathroom really bad before my next thing. So um, just to be telling the truth here. Visit prophetikimagination.org. Please give if you can.
Hmm.
Spread word. We're quarter of the way towards our goal, which is great.
Yeah,
And
that's not bad actually.
No, and so, but like, I want to go past that goal. That's our
That would be nice.
20,000 by Christmas is kind of the minimum required to kind of cover
Yeah.
things. You know, it's just us two working part time. We're not making mad bank. We have,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of stuff we want to do. And there's a video. If you go to that link, there's a video that kind of explains some of what we're up to. Um, yeah, and if you follow the link through to our GoFundMe, there's a longer video that talks about our 3-phase plan. Happy to break down anything for anybody who wants to know. So
Yep.
with that, we'll see you next week. I can't remember what the theme is. I might switch it around, but there'll be a whole new theme next week. So we'll see y'all.
I don't remember what it is. I know it's in a text that you sent me.
I think I've been switching like the order because of
Yeah.
based upon So I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure it out.
Yep.
See you next week, everybody.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.